This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Ghannam.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, Israel's murderous and genocidal campaign against Palestinian civilians continues unabated. Just in the last 24 hours, an Israeli military tank fired on Palestinian civilians queuing for food, killing instantly 26 men, women, and children. That puts the number of Palestinian civilians killed by Israel in the last 3 days well over 200 just for queuing up with food. The situation remains grim. We're going to be covering that story and many other stories today, Jamal, in our show. As it turns out, according to the OCHA, Gaza is the hungriest place on earth. We're going to be covering that because even though Israel alleges that food is being let in, the starvation of Palestinian civilians continues at an extremely high rate. We're also going to be covering the fact that 82% of Israelis support ethnic cleansing and the forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. It's an unbelievable poll number, Jamal. We're going to cover that. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF, aid site has descended into chaos. This goes into a long story about why the starvation continues in Gaza. You know, the UN program has been shut down. The Israelis came up with their own program. It's been a complete disaster. We have a new aid ship, which will try to sail into Gaza. We're going to cover that. And Jamal, about 20 months too late, it seems like there's been a European change of heart in relation to Gaza, in relation to the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Palestine in general, Jamal. The European countries, including Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, are demanding that Israel allow humanitarian aid into Gaza and demand that the UN humanitarian organizations be allowed to work independently. It's a little late and it's a little low, to be honest, Jamal. 20 months of a genocide and starvation, and now the Europeans and some other countries want to get on board. I'm sorry, it's too little and too late. We're going to be covering all those stories today.
That's right, Jess. So let's begin with what's going on in Gaza, really, with this famine, starvation. And Gaza is the only defined area on earth where the entire population is at risk of famine. And that's a spokesman for the UN Humanitarian Agency, OCHA. And this is just, they put a press release continuing and saying, and that's actually what our show is all about, which is Gaza is the hungriest place on earth. And this is according to OCHA's spokesperson, Jens Laerke. It's the only defined area, a country or defined territory within a country where you have the entire population at risk of famine, 100% of the population at risk of famine. I mean, it can't get any worse than this. They have, according to OCHA and other human rights organizations, more than 3,000 trucks waiting in line to enter. For months, Israel has prevented these trucks from entering into Gaza. Last show we talked about how the World Kitchen said that they ran out of supplies.
Right.
They don't have anything to feed the population. Right. And then we'll come later and talk about now all of a sudden the United States and Israel, they have a whole new idea because they don't want the UN to be in charge. They don't want human rights organizations to be in charge. I mean, organizations that have been working for decades, working in the Middle East, working in Africa, they have the expertise, they have the capacity. And so they came up with this new acronym, GHF, which stands for Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Basically, so they can control. Yeah, it's so the distribution of the food, which we'll talk about it later, will be controlled by Israel and the United States. Anyway, I don't care how the food gets in, Jess. Who brings the food? How is it going to get in? It should get in. It should have been there yesterday, last month, and months before, because every single day children are starving to death.
Well, Jamal, the picture that you're painting and that we described at the beginning of the show, cannot even capture how bleak and how catastrophic the starvation is for Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, you mentioned, all of the painful realities. Every single Palestinian in Gaza is starving, and tens of thousands of children are literally within 24 to 48 hours at the precipice of starving to death. We have the thousands of aid trucks in Egypt waiting to get into Gaza that are being denied. We also have, Jamal, and I know you saw this report, but it's worth mentioning. Warehouses full of food in Jordan are rotting right now and are undeliverable. And listen, why, even though I agree with you, yeah, I don't care how the food gets in, but putting the Israelis and the Americans in charge of getting food into Gaza is worse than the wolf guarding the hen house. There has not been any significant appreciable change. I mean, the GHF said that, quote, 2 million meals were delivered in the first 3 days. But that's bogus because children are still starving to death, Jamal. Food is not able to get through. And as I said at the top of the hour, you have the Israeli military in Gaza right now, in Rafah, firing on Palestinians just trying to get food for their children. It's an unbearable and bleak situation. And, you know, the fact that the United States and the Israelis are trying to, even under these grotesque situation and for the level of starvation, are trying to spin this narrative, Jamal, is absolutely ludicrous. There has been no appreciable change. I mean, I think I saw a statistic somewhere, maybe it was from the United Nations too, that about 17% plus minus of the food that was getting into Gaza before is getting in now under the Israeli American GHF plan. So we're at a very grave perspective right now. Every single day that Palestinian children are denied food, Jamal, they will die. I mean, they will die. Even though there's food at the border, there's food that can come in, they're not letting it happen. And of course, insult to injury, the Israeli military is literally firing on starving civilians in Gaza, attempting to feed their children. It's grotesque, Jamal. I mean, there's no way to put it. Maybe that's related, I think, to part of like one of the stories we'll get to today, a change of heart for the Europeans, because the images of starving Palestinians are being broadcast globally right now. Maybe not so much in the United States, but globally. And people are having a hard time, as they should, turning away from these grotesque and painful images right now.
Well, let's talk about actually the food. As we've mentioned, and as you've said, food is rotting in warehouses in Jordan. Trucks have been stuck at the Rafah border for months now. But now here comes a whole new plan, a newly established USbacked aid distribution center in Tel Sultan, west of Rafah. Okay, and we saw on TV the whole collapse basically of what happened on last Tuesday after they. I don't know if people saw the images, how they huddled the Palestinians there in between these fences, like you kind of hoard cattle to get their food.
Yeah.
And these Palestinians, they're starving and waiting for hours in the sun. It's super hot now. And so they rush towards the site in search of food. And what I've been reading and according to sources, indicate that both U.S. private security contractors and Israeli forces fired warning shots as the situation escalated because people are hungry. And when you keep them for hours and hours under the sun before you open a distribution center, what are they going to do? Of course, they're going to rush. So photos released show the Palestinians packed in metal enclosures, I said, like cattle at the site. And they were held there in the intense heat with no clear system of distribution. And this was launched just this past Tuesday under by the way, it's a controversial U.S.-Israeli mechanism because there are like a dozen organizations, established organizations, human rights organizations who are willing to do the distribution, but for whatever reason, they decided to bypass the UN agencies.
We know why. We know why.
Yeah, I mean, and those are the UN agencies that many of their staff members have been shot at, injured, and killed, and so chaos broke, and now they stopped that distribution. I don't know if it has continued as we're speaking, but since they started, they did a little bit of that, and then it slowed down. Meanwhile, the other organizations that have collected all that food, and they have an inventory covering different things, not just like food, also medical supplies, and clothing and so forth, and diapers for children. They're stuck at the border, and that's what's going on. I mean, we're talking about 2 years of basically starvation and hunger. And I should add one thing, because I was reading about the situation in Gaza before this all happened. Gaza was almost self-sufficient. Yes,
that's right.
It's not like a desert with nothing. The Palestinians there, they were growing in hot houses tomatoes and food and all kinds of. They had orchards of oranges, and they had sheep, and they were actually exporting flour, to the outside. And Israel made sure to destroy every single hothouse, every single warehouse, every single manufacturing plant, and that's why they're starving. Not because they didn't have the food, and of course prevented other things that they don't have, like grains and whatever come through Egypt and other sources.
Well, I just want to echo what you said, Jamal, because I've been working in Gaza for the last 25 years, and all of my work and travels to Gaza, I wanna independently verify exactly what you said. That Palestinians in Gaza were, and to some extent continue to be, amazingly resilient in their ability to take care of themselves, develop their own food sources. I could tell you on every single trip that I took to Gaza that the vastness of the agriculture and the system of raising, all sources of food to help feed independently and Palestinians in Gaza was quite extreme in a positive way because, as you said, hothouses, greenhouses, farmland. I mean, this was a really amazing display of self-sufficiency. And of course, some had to be brought in, but that was just part of commerce and the way the system worked there. But Palestinians were able to take care of themselves, Jamal. That's the big take-home message that people aren't really paying attention to. And now, as you said, completely destroyed. Israel has laid waste to any semblance of independent existence for Palestinians at this moment in Gaza. And, of course, we're hearing all these really kind of crazy plans still, Jamal, and we'll get to some of them, later on in the show, of, wanting to put settlements back into Gaza, an expansion of settlements in the West Bank. We may be able to get to that if there's time today in the show. But Israel's expansionist, illegal settlement and ethnic cleansing of Palestine is continuing full steam ahead. This food deprivation and starvation is just one element of this larger picture, and we should focus on it, of course. But we have to keep in mind it's part of this larger picture of what Israel is doing right now. And, I said this at the top of the hour, the fact that the Europeans and some other countries are starting to say, hey, this is really bad. Hey, it's been bad for decades. What has taken you so long?
And I forgot to mention, by the way, for those people who don't know, that Gaza is on the Mediterranean Sea. And guess what? The Gazans are not allowed to fish. Israel has destroyed most of the fishing boats, and if someone attempts to go
Oh, they're
within
shot
a
immediately.
couple of nautical miles from the seashore, they're killed.
Yeah,
So,
immediately.
so there is an abundancy. That's what people might ask. Well, why don't they eat the seafood? They're on the Mediterranean. Well, they can't. They can't even access that, and it's deliberate starvation from every end. I mean, imagine you cannot go and the fishermen, they cannot go out there and fish, and that's why we have that starvation. But this again, it all lines up with the systematic plan to get rid of the people who live in Gaza. I mean, if you want to get rid of an entire population, just ethnically cleanse them, what do? You destroy their education system, their schools, you destroy their hospitals, you destroy their transportation, you destroy their farms, and then at the end of the day, and the Gazans, resisted and stayed on their land. And then the last thing, what's left besides also killing them, which they have been killing them on a daily basis, is to starve you to death. And then maybe you'll succumb and leave. And that basically lines up with our next topic, which is a new poll now that has been released, Jess, that found that 82% of Israeli Jews support the forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, while an additional 56% support expelling Palestinian citizens of Israel. And the poll was done at Pennsylvania State University and conducted by Tamir Sorek for the Israeli polling firm Geocartography Knowledge Group, and that's a story that has been released in Haaretz. And the number marks a massive increase in support for expelling Palestinians compared to a 2003 survey in which support was 45%, which is not little. This is
No, that's still very high.
and 31% respectively, And the poll also indicated high levels of hostility towards Arab Israelis or Palestinians with their Israeli passports, with more than half, which is 56% of respondents voicing support for the deportation of the 2 million Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship, to basically get rid of them. And even more alarmingly, a significant number of people expressed support for committing genocide against Palestinians, with almost half of those surveyed agreeing that the Israeli military should reenact the story of the Israelites' capture of Jericho. I mean, whether you believe that story or not, that's a biblical story where Joshua came into Jericho after being lost in the desert, in the Sinai desert for 40 some years, and killed all the inhabitants of Jericho when they returned. Wow. Those are, it just gives you shows you the mentality of these people think, basically.
Well, yeah, but we understand the mentality of the majority of Israelis, Jamal. We understand that the majority of Israelis, for a very long time, maybe since the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, that they don't want indigenous Palestinians in historic Palestine. And that's been the plan for the last 77 years. We have understood it. We've spoken about it. We've had hundreds of guests over the years speak about it. The evidence is overwhelming. What for me is so stark, especially in the last 20 months, Jamal, here we have a society where 82% of the people believe in this immoral, illegal act of ethnic cleansing of an indigenous community of Palestinians in historic Palestine. And what is happening? But the United States continues to support this illegal, immoral ethnic cleansing and genocide. That, to me, is really the story here. We've understood for decades that this is part of the larger Israeli plan that they have enacted in fits and starts over the last 77 years, and it's been deeply accelerated. And we understand that this society is deeply committed to this immoral act of genocide and ethnic cleansing. But why is the rest of the world on board with this, Jamal? Why is the rest of the world? Why is the rest of the world turning a blind eye to this while this grotesque kind of immoral catastrophe is unfolding? And okay, Europeans, you're waking up. Okay, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Okay, great. You're saying, oh, this is bad, but it's been bad for a very long time, and now you're waking up. I think that we're at an amazing historical inflection point. And again, we don't have time to talk about it right now. We have a lot to cover today. But despite the fact that the Trump administration has been so-called, quote, throwing Netanyahu under the bus with their deals in the Middle East, and they're negotiating with Iran, and their independent negotiation with the Houthis, this murderous genocidal campaign with the help of the United States, Jamal, is continuing through this active act of starving civilians to death. It's really a grotesque historical moment right now for the entire world. It really is. I mean, the world has turned its back on Palestine, Jamal.
Well, to answer your question, the why, and that takes you back to the Nakba. And again, there are people who still deny the Nakba, just like there are people who deny that there is a genocide now. And to, despite all the historians, we've talked about that before. We talked about Ilan Pappé, who's an Israeli historian, and he wrote a whole book about the Nakba. It's called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, the whole systematic plan that happened in 1948 to rid the country of most of its Palestinian inhabitants. And then what happened during the Nakba, which is 1967. And this is a new chapter now, which is Gaza, the Gaza chapter. I mean, when you start talking about, let's get rid of everyone else, let's create a whole new Gaza, let's have the Riviera of the Middle East and so forth, as if the population there, as if 2 million people don't count, It's just like they have no say in the thing. And we're going to talk about the Europeans, but there is still, if you still now, I see all these activists who try to talk to some congressmen and congresswomen, asking them to basically admit that there is a humanitarian crisis or there is a genocide, which they deny that it's happening. But even a humanitarian crisis, they always answer, release the hostages or something like this. It's like about just the hostages. It's like forget about the genocide. Like if Hamas releases the hostages today, every single hostage, that everybody will be happy and merry and they'll have plenty of food and so forth. But it's not, what does a 2-year-old boy or girl has to do with the hostages, the innocent, children and women and elderly and whatever being killed and being starved to death, and they're not willing to pay attention. And the thing is, you're having more Israelis now questioning that. There are Israelis who are refusing to serve in the military. And I'm not trying to make some of these people as angels, but just the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, this is another story. He's one of the people who were in denial, even though he did refer to Israel as an apartheid state. Now, he said that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza, and I'm paraphrasing and quoting at the same time, that thousands of innocent Palestinians are being killed, as well as many Israeli soldiers. Just a reminder, Olmert was the 12th Prime Minister of Israel from 2006 to 2009. He wrote an opinion piece for the Israeli newspaper and website Haaretz that the government of Israel is currently waging a war without purpose, without goals or clear planning, and with no chances of success. He added, that's a quote, never since its establishment has the state of Israel waged such a war. The criminal gang headed by Benjamin Netanyahu has set a precedent without equal in Israel's history in this area. And just a reminder, I said, Olmert is a Likudnik. He's from the same party of Benjamin Netanyahu. He's not from the Labour or whatever.
No, I understand. I just don't want to get too excited about it because, this couple of concerns. I mean, it's important that he said it. People should read about it. People should acknowledge it. But at the same time, let's not forget that Ehud Olmert is also part of a systematic apartheid state. And he's 20 months too late. And he has continued to participate in this ethnic cleansing and genocide. But the fact that he's now coming clean does not absolve him or wash his hands of the dirtiness of the occupation and the apartheid that he helped create, support, and build over the decades. So it's good that he did it, but I think we need to be, really sober and thinking about these voices that are coming, these Israeli voices. It's
Yeah,
hard
but
hard to
to
hear it,
answer
Jamal.
your question, just I mean, if an Israeli former prime minister says that there are war crimes and basically that there is genocide and this is a war, monstrous proportions. He's talking about that the reaction, and then you still have people in the United States and other countries who are in denial.
Yeah.
They just like parrot the same talking points. Talking about the hostages as a deflection, or talking about Israel has the right to defend itself. What are you talking about? Defend itself? Israel is a nuclear power. Israel has all the hardware that any powerful country possesses, including the United States. And you're targeting children and civilians. They just killed an entire family just the other day. The doctor lost 9 of her kids, because they bombed the house. And every time something like this happens, they've targeted the human rights organizations, killed employees of the World Kitchen and so forth. And every time something like this happens, they say, well, miscommunication, or it's a mistake, or it's an error, and whatever. And people accept it. And in general, people accept that. And you're having someone like Ehud, I don't dismiss it because that's very important, but never mind. It's like whatever Benjamin Netanyahu wants to do, he gets the approval stamp. I mean, this is someone who we talked about that. He's a wanted man. He's basically a war criminal.
Yeah, he is a war criminal. And, I want our listeners and viewers to know that even though we're focusing right now on Gaza, as we should, the other piece of news that came out in the last week, Jamal, is that Israel announced in the midst of this genocide a dramatic escalation and expansion of their illegal colonial settlements in the West Bank. I mean, do you know that just in the last couple of months, Jamal, 10,000 Palestinians in the West Bank have been forcibly displaced and removed from their homes and their villages in the West Bank, and no one globally has said a word about it. And now they want to expand the settlements even more. And then to add insult to injury, and this, I blame the Europeans for this, Jamal. So the Europeans said, "Oh, bad Israel, you shouldn't do this. We're going to start putting sanctions on the settlements." The Israelis had the audacity, and I think this might have been Ben Gvir or Smotrich, actually had the audacity to say, "Well, if you give us this slap on the hand, we're going to annex the West Bank." Breaking news: it's already annexed.
Well, they approved the building of 22 new settlements. I mean, that's actually the news you're talking about. They
Yeah,
just,
22 new settlements.
yeah, they just approved that.
Yeah, but they said, and the Israeli said, well, if you criticize us for that, we're going to annex the West Bank. Like that's some big threat. Breaking news, Jamal. It's already annexed. Maybe not under the legal definition, but Israel controls every single inch of the West Bank and Jerusalem right now. So this is what you get when you support a war criminal, when you support a bully, when you support ethnic cleansing without containing it. You see you see the Israeli government just going full steam ahead on this. And again, you can quote blame Benjamin Netanyahu. He's not the problem. He's just a symptom. He's just a symptom of this larger problem, Jamal, of Israel's colonial expansionist, genocidal dreams. It's not just Gaza, it's the West Bank, it's Palestinians in Jerusalem, it's the entire space of historic Palestine. We need to remind our viewers and listeners of this.
Well, I mean, the poll says it all. We
Yeah.
started with that. I mean, think of any society. We're not talking about 10%, 15, just like a minority. 82%. 82% of this society is saying that you have to have forcible displacement of Palestinians in Gaza. And then 56% of them, they say, also get rid of the Palestinians with Israeli citizenship. We're not even talking about the West Bank. These are what we call them 1948 Palestinians, those who remained on their land in 1948 before a single person came from Ukraine and Poland and whatever. They were on their land, and they say, get rid of them. And then you have 45%, but what was it? I forgot the figure. Then you have another percentage that says, slaughter them all. They're starting to talk, biblical things like what happened in Jericho. We know what happened in Jericho. They slaughtered the entire population. That's what they're saying. And that's the big genocide. So we're not talking about a genocide in Gaza. They want a genocide in entire historic Palestine. I mean, there's still a group there. And no one talks about this. No one talks about it.
Yeah, well, I think that's why this particular discussion in our show today is so important, Jamal, because let's look at the extent of anti-Palestinian racism about that. If you looked at that poll where 82% of Israelis support forcible displacement of Palestinians, and you exchange the words 82% of Americans support the forcible displacement of African Americans from the United States. How do you think people would react? Well, maybe they might react differently now.
Well, no. Let's reverse that totally. Let's say 82% of Palestinians said that they want to forcibly displace every single Jewish person from historic Palestine, or they want to commit mass genocide, as they're saying in this poll. If you said that, would be headline news everywhere.
Everywhere.
And this is a poll conducted right in the United States at the University of, Pennsylvania, I think.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, yeah.
And it's done on behest of an Israeli organization. They just...
Well, that shows you the hypocrisy, that shows you the racism, that shows you, just how blinded American politicians are. And I want to make that other distinction, because the majority of Americans, Jamal, and this includes Democrats, Republicans, independents, the majority of Americans absolutely condemn and disagree with this genocide that Israel is committing against Palestinians in Gaza right now, and sees Israel in an incredibly negative light. It's really the politicians, as you rightly pointed out, when they're confronted, they throw up their hands and say, what about the hostages? It's really the kind of power elite and the elitists in DC who are the ones that are just, covering their eyes, covering their ears, covering their mouths, about how devastating this is right now. And at some extent, there will be consequences to this ignoring of this moral kind of black hole that American politicians have sunk to support this genocide. There will be a reckoning someday. There will be accountability someday. And, as we say, roll the tape. We have these politicians saying really crazy things. We have Mike Huckabee saying that Palestinians don't even exist. Don't even, and the official State Department under Marco Rubio, they don't even want to use the words West Bank. This is really crazy stuff, Jamal. They use Judea and Samaria. So, this moment will not be forgotten. Where we are, what we've been going through, we will continue to talk about it, obviously. And, the record is clear and unambiguous. So, but this 82% number is very important. I think you're right. If you had flipped that script and said the same thing about any other group, let alone Palestinians saying it about Israelis, whatever. If you said it about any other group, people, it would be frontline news at the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and all the major media outlets.
Well, you also have Congress people who are also saying something like this crazy things about basically getting rid of all the Palestinians or encouraging to commit genocide against them. But let's move on to what's happening now with this new statement that was signed, and I should say, by the foreign ministers of Austria, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, and the UK. Added to this, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, the EU Commissioner of Equality, Preparedness and Crisis Management, and the EU Commissioner for the Mediterranean. Basically, they have a joint statement. I'm not going to go through all the details of the joint statement, but basically they're saying that Israel must immediately end its blockade, on Gaza, allow humanitarian aid entering Gaza, food, medicines, and essential supplies. They're talking about that the population, which we've been talking about, facing starvation, and the people in Gaza must receive the aid they desperately need. And they also say that they might take some measures against Israel if they don't do that. And,
Well, the measures, that's how the Israelis replied. That's what I was referring to. They said, if you take these measures, we're going to annex everything. So
they say allow a full resumption of aid into Gaza immediately and enable the UN and humanitarian organizations to work independently and impartially to save lives, reduce suffering, and maintain dignity. It took them 2 years. It took them 2 years.
The joke, Jamal. I'm sorry
to say that, but I think all these things are important. You know why they're important? Because history will judge them, and they'll be judged why it took them 2 years. And at the same time, like my question, what triggered that? Was it the image of the young girl walking through fire after Israel bombed her house and killed her family, or it's the image of the young boy who got shot in the head or in the chest, or what? Because we've been looking, the entire world, we've been looking at all these images of, or is it the number, or is it, that the number of children killed is now over 15,000. I mean, what triggered that, in your opinion, Jess?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't think you're going to like my answer. I don't think the Europeans and all the people and all the countries' foreign ministers who signed off on this letter were moved. I don't believe they're moved by the images. I don't believe they're moved by the statistics. I have a slightly different sense of why they're moved. I think they see, given what they're hearing from their own populations, my theory is twofold. One, they see that their own constituents are so angry at these governments for allowing this genocide to occur that it has the potential to destabilize the ruling party's power. And they see the writing on the wall. Secondly, I really wonder, because of all the efforts that are being made in the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, because we see where this is going. All the countries that have supported Israel in this genocide, Jamal, including the United States, eventually are going to be party to an international criminal court, International Court of Justice claim of genocide, and they're going to be all participants. So I don't think it's because of love for Palestinians or, oh, after 2 years, we finally saw how bad it is. I think they're trying to protect themselves, either in terms of their own power in their countries, or they're trying to protect themselves legally, Jamal. It's unbelievable to me to think that they're doing it because, oh, we see this. They've been seeing it for 2 years, man. And it's not like it's been right in front of their not right in front of their face. It has been. So I think it's some other calculation that they see that the writing may be on the wall for them, either politically or legally.
I think they're also looking at history books. I think that's what they're looking at. They're looking decades from now when historians look back at this genocide that was the first genocide, I would say, that was seen in real time by the entire world. Televised, not televised, on the internet, everywhere. This is not, because when we talk about World War I, World War II, we kind of go to the historians and history books and few images here and there and some black and white reel. But here, you're seeing this in color on a daily basis, streaming through your phone or your computer and so forth, and the evidence is there. I mean, how can you deny that you have all these children who've been killed? You have international doctors. I just watched a doctor, I think, from Norway the other day talking about in the hospital, one of the few operating hospitals, talking that how the injuries and the dead bodies have not stopped from coming, and that's another thing why even journalists and from even organizations who you don't expect them to do, they've been questioning Israel, why you haven't been allowing journalists in. And of course, the Israeli answer has been always, oh, for your safety. Really? For your safety? Like you care about, you've killed, how many journalists they have killed in Gaza?
250 or more.
Yeah, and for your safety, you don't want to have anyone to witness this, because if they allow journalists, this would not have continued. But regardless, because of citizen journalism, because everyone has an iPhone, everyone has a smartphone, people have been seeing these images, and how can you deny what your eyes have been seeing? Although there are people who have been doing that, but at the end of the day, that's what they're trying to save. They're trying to save their reputation, nothing less than that and nothing more.
Yeah. So as long as we're doing this critical analysis of the Europeans, Jamal, let's throw the Gulf countries and the Arab League into this. So after 20 months of this genocide, right, you had the first high-level Arab delegation not attempting to go into Gaza because they don't have the courage to do that, attempting to go into the West Bank to have the first high-level meetings with the Palestinian Authority and to see the ongoing settlement expansion and the ethnic cleansing that's going on in the West Bank. So you have all these high-level, diplomats, primarily from Saudi Arabia. Guess what the Israelis did with all of their Abraham Accord buddies? They denied them. Yeah, they denied them entry to come in to the West Bank. So kind of interesting to see that, given the extent of the complicity with Arab leaders and Arab countries too, Jamal, because we can't let them off the hook too. They need to be held.
Yeah, but there is a difference, Jess, in this. The difference is that they haven't been denying that there is a genocide, that there is an ongoing genocide.
They just haven't done anything about it. Yeah.
They haven't done, and the populations for sure haven't denied that. But here you have countries in Europe who were giving, weapons. They're supplying Israel with weapons, bombs, missiles, etc., to drop on Palestinians. And two, providing Israel with political cover. There are countries, even after the International Court of Justice issued a warrant for Netanyahu, allowed him to fly over their airspace and allowed him to go there. So again, That's the denial. And now all of a sudden they come and say, okay, enough is enough now. You've killed enough people. You've starved enough people. We're changing our mind. And that's the difference. To me, that's the
Yeah,
major difference.
I mean, I'll grant you that, but I think that the insult and the slap in the face to these Arab ministers and leaders, it should be a bit of a wake-up call because they have always had this idea that they can do a deal with the Israelis. They have always believed that. And let's not forget a lot of those things that you said that the Europeans did. Some of these Arab states and leaders did the same thing. They allowed airspace for Israeli military, you know, uh, planes to fly over to do various missions. Let's not forget that. The sharing of intelligence. Let's not forget that. And, it's not like all of these Arab countries have been standing, vociferously and loudly at the international stage condemning it. There's been some, obviously, but, a lot of them have been really quiet. I agree with your analysis, but I'm just saying, these Arab leaders who thought somehow they would just walk into Palestine, walk into the West Bank, and be allowed by the Israelis. I think they had a little bit of a rude wake up call, Jamal.
They did. So, moving on, Jess, and this might be symbolic because, it's also news, that the another ship now from the so-called Freedom Flotilla coalition is attempting to break Israel's months-long blockade of Gaza. The first ship was attacked by drones. This one is happening now as we are speaking. The new boat is called the Madeleine, and is due to disembark from Catania in Sicily on Sunday, which is today, with a cargo of humanitarian aid and several high-profile activists on board, including Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg and Game of Thrones actor Liam Cunningham and European Member of Parliament Rima Hassan and Palestinian-American lawyer Huwaida Arraf. And
Okay.
it's on its way. I haven't followed the most recent news, but it's supposed to be going on now. And this sailing marks the second attempt in as many months by the Freedom Flotilla, a coalition of humanitarian groups, to reach Gaza. And as I've mentioned, the last mission at the start of May was aborted after another FFC vessel, the Conscience, was attacked by drones while sailing in international waters off the coast of Malta.
Well, I wonder if it seems like the Israelis haven't gotten the courage to violate Sicilian, the airspace in Sicily, to send their drones to attack it. I wonder what the plan is because, you know, they have historically done some very aggressive and horrific things to these Freedom Flotilla boats that have attempted to come into Gaza. So we wish them, all safe passage into Gaza, but clearly they're taking big risks right now. We shall see what happens, right?
Well, I mean, that's the concept. The concept is that Israel has a blockade. It's preventing humanitarian aid. The rest of the world is not doing anything about it until recently. And then now you have activists who are actually, in my opinion, putting their lives at risk by sailing. And again, it's symbolic because I can't imagine how, you have 2 million people now. We're talking about 2 million people who are starving. And what a small boat, how much supplies can a small boat bring? It's just totally symbolic.
Yeah,
And
yeah. But with the people on board, that symbolism may carry some additional weight. I mean, and going back to your point today, looking at what these European countries and what the European Union and the UK and Canada and New Zealand and Australia, what they've made these statements, this is coming on the heels of some sort of shift in the European narrative. So this is all just building on the condemnation, the global condemnation of this murderous genocidal campaign that Israel is carrying out. Yeah, I mean, we wish them safe passage, of course, Jamal. But I'm even with these high-profile people who are on board, it's not going to stop the Israeli military from, harassing them. I know that they will harass them.
Also, just before we go, negotiations are still going to have another ceasefire, which negotiations that are handled now by Special Envoy Witkoff. And supposedly Israel accepted that part and Hamas rejected it because it does not satisfy its demands, which basically,
end the war.
Briefly, because I don't want to comment on this because this is kind of a changing thing as we are speaking, but they want a complete ceasefire, but we're talking about 60 days. And also we're talking about that the Israelis will remain in Gaza. By the way, something important, Hamas said that they will step down. I mean, that's it's in a clear message, but I haven't seen this being communicated that after this is done, that they've accepted. Sound to me that they accepted like 90% of those demands. And so that's why I said, I don't know if those negotiations are dead in the water, but
I just heard that the negotiations are going on. Hamas has made a number of concessions and agreements, as you said, 90%. But the idea that they would release all hostages and not, in return, receive a total cessation of the war and the blockade of food, water, and medicine coming in to Gaza is kind of a bizarre negotiating idea that the Americans and the Israelis have. I mean, it's
no, they don't say about releasing all the hostages, actually, in the initial phase. They're talking about
I mean,
part and also some of the deceased
I mean, we have to go back to this ultimate point, right, Jamal, when we have to say the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu do not want a ceasefire. So
no.
And I'm not even sure the Americans want a ceasefire, despite what is being said. So let's keep that reality in mind, that Benjamin Netanyahu wants genocide and wants mass starvation. He does not want peace.
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.